Good evening, and thank you for joining the inaugural From Pause to Clause Alumni Speakers Visionary 2020 series. We are in our fourth month and second time offering an evening edition. We are grateful for our first-time participants, as well as those of you who have returned again. Your Office of Alumni Relations appreciates each of you. Furthermore, we will continue to bring remarkable alumni to speak about relevant topics that will support our students, recent graduates, as well as alumni who are seeking career changes and those who just wish to lend support. As always, we wish to thank the alumni panelists who share their area of expertise. We did not seek you out, yet you came running with the spirit of a mighty panther, which we are, sharing your knowledge base when the call to participate went forth. This is our newest series of From Pause to Clause, and we are still dedicating it to the Perfect Vision class of 2020 as they exercise their ability to be visionaries. Let me share a tad bit of history of the Office of Alumni Relations signature event. The Alumni Student Networking event, titled From Pause to Clause, was originally designed in 2008. When Corrine Taylor, who was a sophomore and represents the class of 2010, expressed that students should be engaged and learn from alumni of our exceptional university. Over the years, we continuously call on our alumni community to embrace our alumni in waiting, commonly known as students. We encircle them until they become a member of the only permanent constituency of our alma mater. As Cubs, they develop through discovery, academically, socially, and spiritually, finding their way as their talents grow into claws and become fully entrenched as felines of service locally, nationally, and globally, while remembering to provide financial support to the institution that placed them on their paths of being well-rounded citizens. There is more to the program, and feel free to read the entire historical review in the alumni section on the CAU website. As we begin our conversation, I would like to express thanks to my colleague, Chastity B. Evans, class of 2010, who serves as the program manager in the Office of Alumni Relations. She will be your host this evening, for she created this space for our interaction. Chastity, it is now time for you to begin the exchange.
Well, thank you so much, alumna Galen E. Gatewood Joshua, for the wonderful introduction and historical context. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining your Office of Alumni Relations for the Vision 2020 series, Self-Care Part 2, Mental Health Stigma Within the Black Community. A super special thank you to alumna Dr. Michelle Rhodes, Program Specialist for the Office of Online Learning and Continuing Education, for being the technical commander behind all of our webinars. For many of us, the term self-care evokes images of yoga class, a spa day, or a peaceful meditation. While these may be valuable self-care activities for some, they aren't the only ways to support your personal well-being. During this webinar, we will learn about comprehensive self-care, which centers on 5 interconnected aspects of well-being: physical, emotional, social, community, and purpose. We will explore the science of well-being and receive practical tips to nurture your mind and body. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into your Q&A panel below. I will bring them up during our Q&A section to discuss. Now, without further ado, introducing our first panelist for this evening is alumnus Dr. Christopher Bass. Alumnus Bass is originally from Washington, D.C., a place that he credits with influencing him and his ideas related to ethnocentric research and study. Growing up in the 1980s, he witnessed the crack epidemic firsthand as it changed his once historic neighborhood. These experiences provided him with the fuel needed to escape the harsh realities and dwell into the science of psychology. Introduced to the field of psychology in his middle school years, he saw the field as an avenue to reach and impact the minds of inner city youth and communities. He also saw it as a welcome space for the burgeoning stereotypes that had begun to rise about inner city youth. As a first-generation college graduate, he received psychology degrees from Clark Atlanta University in 1992 and the University of Wisconsin in 1995 and in 2000. After earning his doctorate, he began a series of academic appointments and clinical practice along the eastern United States. An avid scholar, he has published numerous articles, book chapters, and books investigating the effects of specific culturally relevant treatment approaches on active and reactive conduct disorder and varying personality disorders. While his clinical and research area of focus centers on crimes involving sex, Alumnus Bass has also worked with a number of other clinically recognized mental disorders. Clinically, he has served in a variety of posts, including clinical director at a residential treatment facility for agitated late adolescent males, psychologist for the city of Atlanta, and senior psychological partner at the Bass Medical and Psychological Consultants Firm, LLC. His work with police departments and other service agencies around the country has provided him with a platform to lecture and speak on cultural considerations and traditional fit-for-duty evaluations, psychological variables related to police and community interaction, educated youth involvement in the criminal justice system, recidivism, and alternative approaches for family reintegration and serial offender profiling. Alumnus Bass has held faculty appointments on the campuses of Clark Atlanta University, Hampton University, Morehouse College, University of Georgia, Go Dogs, Walden University, Oglethorpe University, and many others. Welcome, Alumnus Bass. Thank you so much for being a part of this panel today and for always serving your alma mater, Go Panthers. How are you doing today?
Hey, I am well. I'm well. Thank you for that introduction. You know, someone once told me that those who crave long introductions shouldn't be speaking, and those who are speaking typically don't crave long introductions. So I don't know if you noticed that in the chat, I said, gosh, because anytime someone goes into your story, I'm not that guy.
Look, I understand. I'm the same way. I'll be looking around like, okay, is it almost over? Well, we're going to go ahead and go into your first question, and you deserve that introduction because, my man, you are doing your thing over here. So, according to Mental Health America, Black people experience direct traumatic stressors, including being heavily policed or being the victims of physical and verbal attacks. Indirect stressors, such as the effects of viewing the video of the killing of George Floyd, and transmitted stressors, from traumatic stress passed down from one generation to the next. Despite these challenges, however, Black people are far less likely to seek care. Why do we experience traumatic stressors more than other races?
Well, you know, there's several pieces in your question. And one piece that you talked about was generational trauma. We have to put a pin there because we can all, I'm sure everyone on this call can talk for at least an hour and a half on PTSS, you know, post-traumatic slave syndrome, which was actually coined by Dr. Joy DeGruy many, many years ago. It still, you know, resonates. But I want to start my answer quickly by just saying something that was discovered 2015. And what they found was that the majority of African Americans had a negative worldview or negative belief in what this country could provide for them. Where did that come from? where did it stem? Well, we can use the work of Joy DeGroy and say, you know what? Before we had the rights that we have now, there have been many people who have suffered under the ill hand or foot of discrimination. So are we as African Americans more likely to experience trauma? I would say that all groups experience trauma, but we typically experience more compound trauma, number one. And then number two, the traumas that we experience typically are more severe than other groups. Why the DSM-5 even brought up racism as a stressor and racism as a contributor to mental illness. So we're starting to really begin to understand the effects of racism. One thing that is often neglected is the concept of microaggressions. Something as small as someone saying, hey, can I touch your hair? Or, hey, you know, you are smart for African American, or as the people in the boxes can probably attest, being the only African American, you know, in centers where they work or where they went to school or what have you, it's very difficult. So there's so many things associated with how we get to where we are. You talked about George Floyd, and what's happening right now in terms of social justice is unprecedented. And I can go in my hand or in my book and I can show you names of brothers and sisters who are still fearful every time a police officer comes behind them. You know, they didn't just learn this with George Floyd. You know, they didn't just learn this with Trayvon Martin. They didn't just learn this, you know, in the 80s and the 70s. This whole concept has been with us for so long. So we have to really get into a lot of understanding and sort of, what's that guy's name? I'm blanking on the father of psychology. The father of psychology, and one of my students should help me right here. The father of psychology, Wilhelm Wundt. That was a test for you all. Wilhelm Wundt came up with something called introspection. And introspection was taking the time to really understand your own mental processes. So if we begin to understand more of our own mental processes, then I think that we can get a better handle on it. So, so much more to say, but I know you have another question for me.
Well, I mean, I definitely was taking my notes down here because I was learning a lot, especially on these micro aggressions that you was talking about. Now, in terms of when you mentioned racism, you know, leading to possible mental illnesses, kind of leads into my next question with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You know, it was reported that he had severe depression during periods of his life and refused psychiatric treatment, even when urged to seek care by his staff. So why is this scenario still common today? I know you kind of touched base on it a little bit, but particularly with African Americans not seeking, you know, mental health care because of this stigma.
Well, first thing you have to also include in that question is access. You know,
Yes.
we typically don't have the levels of access, you know, access to qualified mental health professionals like the ones that, you know, appear on the screen today. You know, we typically don't see that. As a matter of fact, when it comes to those who look like us who provide services, we're really talking about less than 20%. So with that being said, going into your Martin Luther King question, that's a complicated question related to religion and the religion and the impact of religion's, you know, thoughts on mental illness. Well, it was Jesus who said or called himself Jehovah Rapha, right? Meaning that he could take care of all things. He was a healer. And so many times, churches around the country and around the world have continued the belief that only Jesus or only God can provide all your cures, whether that's physical or mental. The problem that we're finding now, and even with Martin Luther King's time, you mentioned stigma. The problem that we're finding, unfortunately, is that you're inundating pastors and imams and religious elders with mental illness that they're not trained to work with. So we see a lot of folks being exorcised or putting oil on their heads and so forth, which is an ancient tradition, but, you know, it doesn't work as well as it could. Now, we believe and we understand that if you believe something, sort of like a placebo concept, if you believe something helps, then ultimately you begin to feel better. And I'm not saying anything negative about the church. Again, I'm not trying to get struck down, and I have a good pastor. But I will say this, until religious figures understand how much they can actually help, then we're going to continue to have an issue similar to what you mentioned with Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was a private man, but he also understood that if he went to go seek out treatment, then word would get out. And so many of us believe that having a mental illness, that means that something's wrong with you. And we have so much on us right now that the idea of putting on another piece of weight, you know, I can take my problems to Jesus. Jesus will fix me, you know. So we got a lot of work to do with our pastors and religious figures, and hopefully soon, and there are some initiatives out there, but hopefully we can sort of merge religion and psychology.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Bass. I mean, that was very heartfelt. And I really hope for the people that are listening today, because we all kind of grew up within that same territory. I know particularly myself, you know, that's a lot to listen to and to understand and learn from. So thank you. If you all have any questions for Alumnus Bass, please please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel right now. We will be sure to get to them during our Q&A session. Thank you again, Dr. Bass. Awesome sauce. Introducing our next panelist for this afternoon is alumna Casey Phillips Brown, class of 1994 and 1996. Whoop, whoop. Day by day in every way, I'm getting better and better. This phrase was told to alumna Phillips Brown as a social work student. She continues to use it as a foundation as she assists others in planting seeds of change in their lives. Alumna Casey Phillips Brown has been providing mental health services for over 26 years. She earned both her BA in Mass Communication and Master's of Social Work from Clark Atlanta University. She is a licensed clinical social worker who offered continuing education units to mental health professionals through the California Board of Behavioral Sciences. She is known for her energetic and motivational style of speaking, and her passion is contagious. It is amazing to see how many people are suffering from treatable disorders and they don't even know it. My goal is to educate as many people as possible to the importance of learning how to maintain good mental health in order to have good overall health. Alumna Phillips Brown has been certified as a sexual assault crisis volunteer and a trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy clinician. She has experience as an examination coach and consultant to other licensed clinicians. Alumna Phillips Brown is a clinical supervisor providing individual and group clinical supervision to associate social workers and associate marriage and family therapists. She was a part-time lecturer for the School of Social Work at Cal State Long Beach and runs a private practice, New Perspectives, in Gardena, California. Alumna Phillips Brown provides services through employee assistance programs and is a certified health coach that assists parents of children who have been diagnosed with ADHD treat the disorder without medication. She wrote the highly regarded book, We Just Say No, Treating ADHD Without Medication. She facilitates corporate trainings, business enhancements, college lecturers, and career consulting. Alumna Phillips Brown is also CEO of the Nan Washington Global Wellness Foundation that meets the health needs of people around the world. Alumna Phillips Brown, thank you so much for being a part of this panel and for always serving your alma mater. How are you doing today, Miss 94 and Miss 96?
I'm well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here representing the West Coast. Thank you, Colby, for this at least. I'm so happy to be able to participate. Thank you. And
we are so happy to have you. So we're going to go into your first question for today. Statistics tell us that about 25% of African Americans seek mental health care compared to 40% of whites. Unequal access to healthcare is one major contributor to this disparity. Due to the marginalization by healthcare professionals, African Americans tend to rely on family, community, and special support and spiritual support instead of medical or psychiatric treatment, even when it is critically necessary. Why is this?
Well, one of the reasons are financial barriers, right? Some African Americans don't seek therapy due to having less disposable income. There are mental health agencies, though, that do accept Medi-Cal. So I do want to let you know that there's a couple of resources that can be helpful for you. There's mental health agencies that accept Medi-Cal. There are also private practice clinicians that have a sliding scale. I have a really funny story about a girl who lived in Leimert Park in Los Angeles, and we treated her for Medi-Cal, but we learned that she had a eating disorder. So her mother went and found a private practice clinician in Beverly Hills who took a sliding scale and would see her daughter for about $10 to $20 a session. And so it was funny because the girl would come back to group and like, oh, I had therapy in Beverly Hills today. So she was very proud of the fact that she was able to get resources even though they weren't financially able. Some of the other reasons why we turn to our family, community, and spiritual support is because those are the people that we trust. As African Americans, we don't rely on too many people because we have some trust issues, which from post-traumatic stress disorder, different other authorities, you can see why we have those issues. So one of the reasons we rely on family, family, we may argue and fight, but for the most part, we know we can count on them. And we know that they'll be there for us when we're down. And although our family may make us crazy, they tend to be there when we really, really need them. So that's one of the reasons why we would turn to our sister, our cousin, our godmother first before we may go to a mental health professional. We also rely on our community. Friendships are the cornerstone of the African American culture. We have friendships that span from elementary school. I have friends still from Clark, Atlanta, that we speak to almost every day. We have college into adulthood friendships that continue on. When we need someone to share our deepest secrets, it's often our friends that we turn to. When our husbands or wives are frustrating us, it's often our friends that we call or text just to get that vent out to and be like, oh my gosh, right? In the African American community, we truly also rely on spiritual support. Our church families, our choirs, our teen church for the teenagers. We have usher boards. These are the people who support us through prayer and through spiritual guidance. Sometimes we're reluctant to get therapy. One of the reasons is, again, the mistrust. If you want to check out a great book, it's called Medical Apartheid, and it talks about the experimentation and different things that have happened throughout our time here in America, the Tuskegee experiment and J. Sims. So there's a lot of things in the medical community that is done, and it creates a mistrust that often keep people from wanting to reach out and to get the help that they need. So that's why we need events like this, webinars like this, so people can know that there are people out here who can help you and who you can trust. So what we often want to do as mental health professionals, we want to appeal to our clients and say, we can be there for you. A lot of African Americans want a clinician that looks just like them, and they can't always find it. So when researching some therapy sites, you can specifically ask for a clinician that you feel will best support you and understand you. Do not feel ashamed to say, I am a Black man, I would like a Black male, or I'm a Black man, I want a Black woman. A Black woman, I want a Black woman. It's okay. You can ask, and it's their responsibility to try to find someone who can help you. Funny story, when I was looking for therapy years ago, I was like, only a Black woman's gonna understand my pain. She's the only person that'll get it. And so I was looking down the list and I couldn't figure out who the Black person was by the name. I was like, all these names, I can't tell. So I picked a name, went to therapy. I'm a very private person. So for someone to make me open up is quite a task. And from the moment I walked in, I started crying the whole time. As I was leaving, I looked up and I go, excuse me, I'm sorry, what ethnicity are you? And she looked at me. And the funny thing is, it didn't matter what she was. I knew she wasn't Black, but it didn't matter what she was. She could have been a Martian. This person opened me up because of the way she connected with me. And so please know that it does not always have to be an African-American clinician to meet your needs. My therapist was the best, and she was not a Black woman. Okay. So just to real quick,
what was she?
Oh, okay. She was Latina. She was like, I'm Latina. I was like, oh, okay. I'll see you next week. And I cried myself on out the office. So some resources for people who are looking for therapy right now, and maybe you want someone that looks like you. We have www.therapyforblackgirls.com, and that's specifically just for Black women who want a Black therapist. There's a site on Instagram, and her hashtag is The Gathered Fight. GATHERED fight, which is free therapy for Black women. During this time after the George Floyd murder, she was able to get white clinicians and other allies to donate money to provide free therapy for African Americans, citizens, and also not citizens, but people, and for the therapists who may need some services as well. And we need to establish rapport and trust. It's important for clinicians to engage the client and create a safe space. Talk with them, not at them. And then try to ask questions without being intrusive. The joke I teach my clinical students or my social workers and MFTs, don't be the nosy social worker, right? You don't want to be, so where'd you go? Oh, what are you doing? How's your father? You want to ask a question, that will create connection. So that's what you're looking for in a therapist.
Awesome. If you don't mind, can you drop those links into the chat box as well? So, we can definitely be able to follow them and look them up, because yeah. Okay.
I'll do it right after my second question.
Thanks, girl. Thanks. So, in the Black community, culture, a person's belief, norms, values, and language, they all play a vital role in every aspect of our lives, including mental health, because you definitely just touched base on this. Do you utilize methods that involve a culturally responsive mental health treatment in your practice?
I try to. I think the best thing for us to do is just we try to focus on being yourself, because sometimes culture may not come into play, right? So I remain professional while I'm trying to be me. I have a vibrant personality and I'm friendly, but I want to be professional as well. And people, if I try to not be myself and come across like this, I'm not going to do very well, and people aren't going to be able to connect with me. So I think trying to be professional is really what I try to do while being myself. I try to provide interventions that people can relate to and they're easy to access. I focus on diet and coping skills as well. So Black people know who is real and who is not real, who really cares about them and who does not. So who they want to give a chance to and who they want to get to know them. So I focus on being authentic, compassionate, empathic, and sincere. You really know that I care about you when you come into my office. In regards to providing the interventions, I use their universal. Again, they're not necessarily for Black people. They focus on engaging a human being. I don't find myself being culturally specific, but I'm human focused. I work on getting to know a person and assist them in connecting how their past experiences may be impacting them in the here and now. This pandemic is affecting people in different ways because we all have different experiences. For those who have trust issues, we are waking up each morning trying to figure out what is really going on. Like, what is the conspiracy? Who are these people? What are they doing? For those with anxiety, they are worried about what's the new crisis of the day? Is the world coming to an end? For those who are depressed or are grieving the loss of loved ones already, hearing about daily death tolls and experiencing death in their own family can increase their depression. So mental health services can provide a place for someone to process all of those feelings that are going on right now in the world. I try to come through with a holistic approach. As a certified health coach, I look at alternative and holistic approaches. In addition to psychotherapy, I assess the client's diet and I offer insight onto how they eat and how that affects their mood and their energy level. So in my practice, I also address the ADHD naturally based on my book, We Just Said No, Treating ADHD Without Medication. I encourage the families to also use chiropractic services and acupuncture services, as well as getting massages. So we're looking at not just the psychotherapy, I'm looking at everything else that comes with it. So lastly, in regards to coping skills, we're always looking at how do you take care of yourself, and that's so different for each person. During this time, are you able to do something outside while being protected? Are you journaling, creating music, working on your home life, having family game nights? So I try to encourage people to, again, do things that make them feel better about themselves and without putting too much stress. No one has to come out of this pandemic doing something amazing. You did not have to come out of here having, lost 100 pounds with a doctorate. It's okay. You can sit home and just cry a couple of days. There's no pressure. And I think that people get that a lot too. Some are like, you have to do this. You don't, right? You can just be yourself, and we're all just making it day by day. So as I end, I just wanted to mention that in this time, it is so important that no matter if you decide to seek therapy from a mental health clinician, or if you just talk to a friend or the church counselor, whatever you decide, just talk to someone.
Thank you so much, Alumna Phillips Brown. Please drop your link for your book so those that want to purchase can purchase today, because we are all about uplifting and building each other. And also drop your links for your practice, because we may have someone on this call that may be yearning for your help. So please do that. Dr. Bass, you do it too now. Don't forget now, because I have to see your links. All right. So thank you so much, Alumna Phillips Brown, for the essential tips and materials, girl. Look, y'all gonna make me want to write a little book over here, you and Dr. Bass, because tips I don't took over here. I am amazed, kind of blown away a little bit. If you all have any questions for Alumna Phillips Brown, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel now. We'll be sure to get to them during our Q&A session. Thank you again, Miss 94 and 96. Whoop whoop.
Yeah, you.
Don't even look like it, do she? Look at him, 12, but it's cool. Introducing our next panelist for this afternoon is alumna Dr. Alicia Rohr. Alumna Rohr was born in Alabama and attended Northwest Shoals Community College in Alabama for 1 year as a Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship recipient. She later transferred to Clark Atlanta University, where she received a Bachelor's of Arts degree in psychology and graduated cum laude in 2007. During her matriculation, she was selected to participate in various scholars programs, a travel abroad program, and held leadership positions within the psychology department. Alumna Rohr earned her Master of Science degree in Family Studies, specializing in marriage and family therapy from the University of Kentucky, and earned a Doctor of Philosophy degree in Family Sciences from St. Louis University. While in both graduate programs, Alumna Rohr held leadership positions, published journals, presented at national and international conferences, and was a recipient of several fellowships and a doctoral student award for dedication and service to the social science field. Alumna Rohr is currently a licensed marriage and family therapist and has a private practice, Rohr Psychotherapy, and consulting services in Marietta, Georgia. She provides individuals, couples, family, and group therapy. Treatment issues include couples that struggle with emotional connection, intimacy, parent-child conflict, Black fatherhood, self-care, and mood disorders. In addition, Alumna Rohr is an AAMFT approved supervisor, professor, researcher, and consultant. As an alum, Alumna Rohr continues to give back to CAU, serving as a committee member for the Psychology Alumni Society, Diplomat Alumni Travel Abroad Program, and her private practice is an internship site for junior and senior psychology majors. At the end of the spring semester, she created a COVID-19 processing and coping group for students in the AUC. The purpose of the group was to create a safe space for students to process emotions, thoughts, and behaviors regarding the impact of COVID-19 and develop healthy coping skills and self-care strategies to manage the stressors and reactions of the global pandemic. Thank you so much, Alumna Rohr, for being a part of this panel and for always serving your alma mater. How are you doing today?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me. So excited.
No problem. Thank you so much for participating and serving as an awesome panelist today. So we all know a person or people in our family who silently live with mental illness for fear of being judged. How can we work together to recognize and address these challenges?
Yes, good question. People are suffering in silence, they're suffering alone, and they're feeling embarrassed and ashamed for having a mental illness. So we first have to really address this fear of not only being judged, but also the abandonment and the rejection that comes from having a mental illness. We also have to be mindful of how we talk about mental health and how we talk about people who have mental health issues. We have to continue to educate ourselves, be informed of the signs and the symptoms of mental health, of depression, anxiety, trauma, and what that looks like for different people, specifically people of color. When you see something, say something, right? Also be, as I said before, be mindful of how we talk about people with mental health. I know sometimes in the community, we'll say, oh, that person is crazy, or that Uncle Joe, you know, like he's on medication, or, you know, or saying, what do you have to be stressed out about? I know for parents, sometimes can be minimizing for children of, you're too young to go through anything, or just pray about it, or just take a nap. All of these things can be very minimizing and dismissing to people who have that, right? And it also perpetuates that problem and the fear of being judged. I'm not going to open up and talk about my anxiety, my depression, my loneliness, or going through a divorce or going through a loss if I'm going to be shamed and talked about, right? So we really have to be mindful of these critical statements that we say, and making sure that we're using caring statements. So again, those critical statements perpetuates the problems and minimizes how people are feeling. I always say that the core ingredient of trust is vulnerability. I'm not going to be vulnerable with someone that I don't trust, and I'm not going to be trusting to someone that I'm not vulnerable. So even with teens or your friends, that family member that's really quiet and timid, or isolating themselves during the pandemic, you haven't heard from them in a while, reach out to them and see how things are going, and develop that trusting relationship. I always tell people, clients, family, friends, to have those caring statements, those statements of encouragement. Being able to validate and empathize goes a long way. When, as a supervisor, when I'm working with therapists in training, kind of the therapy 101 is, can you empathize and validate with people? I think it's no better way of feeling like I feel heard and understood, that they get it. They understand what I'm going through, right? That I'm dealing with this loss or this grief. So we really have to make sure that we're empathizing and validating and showing compassion, at least. Excuse me. And then not only just saying those statements, but also following up. I know some people say, oh, I'm praying for you, or I'm checking on you, or how are you? But be consistent, follow up and check in to see how people are doing. Being mindful of your words. How do you create a safe space, again, for people to talk about the things that they're going through? We also have to normalize asking for help and seeking therapy. We can have Jesus and we have a therapist, right? We can have both. I think there's a little shirt that says Jesus and therapist that I've seen people have. Jesus and therapist. But we have, I bet that's going to also help when we're asking for help and seeking therapists, to seek from that, or shift from feeling fearful about it, from being courageous. And it takes a lot of vulnerability to say, I'm not feeling good, I'm sad, or I'm feeling depressed, or whatever those emotions are. So again, we have to create safe, or create and seek healthy, trusting support systems. I know back in the day, you know, we have that statement of what goes on in the family stays in the family. That's outdated, right? We can use the it takes a village to overcome. So again, reaching out to people. We also have to debunk the myth about therapy. I know Casey was saying earlier about this as well, but debunking the myth about going to see a therapist, whether that therapist looks like you or not, that therapy is for everyone. Therapy is just not for white people, right? Or for people that have money. Therapy is for the people who may be the strong one. Therapy is for people who may be just going through something that needs to process what they're going through. You don't necessarily have to be in a crisis. You're not crazy. You're not weak. But you can use therapy as a place to process the things that's happening, especially now with the global pandemic. We're all been stuck in the house, all the racial unrest that's going on. Lastly, I want to say is the impact of mental health is very systemic, right? We think about what we're going through is only impacting us, but it affects everybody. It affects your work, your school performance, your interactions with other people, your relationships, how you parent, your sibling relationships. We also think about how some people can be dealing with functional depression. Yeah. That I'm still able to go to work, I still have my mask on, that everything is okay, and not realizing that I'm past that burnout spot, right? I'm past the place that's not healthy. So we have to continue to take inventory of what's happening internally with us.
That is so necessary to know and to hear, and note taken. So the root of mental health stigma among Black people can be traced back to slavery. And I know Dr. Bass and alumna Phillips Brown also kind of touched on this. So I really like the fact that this is, becoming very organic. So at that time, it was commonly thought that slaves were not sophisticated enough to develop depression, anxiety, or other mental health disorders. So why are these historic misconceptions still ingrained in our culture to this day?
Yes, we first have to highlight that these are historic misconceptions and cultural myths. Think about who created them.
Mm-hmm.
And how can they tell our narratives and our lived experiences of what we're going through? It goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's so dismissing and minimizing by saying slaves were not sophisticated enough to develop mental health disorders. Again, it's just insulting to think about that, and it also perpetuates the problem of invalidating what slaves experienced and what keeps them from asking for help, or for us asking for help now, for us to just internalize those problems where we're not even able to make sense of what's happening to us or around us, right? Again, the mental health stigma does make it challenging for people to talk about their emotional and mental health needs, especially within the Black community. Dr. Bass earlier talked about Dr. Joy DeGruy, who talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome, which describes those multi-generational trauma experienced by African Americans that leads to undiagnosed and untreated post-traumatic stress disorder in enslaved Africans and their descendants. Also, Dr. Ken Hardy, a family therapist, he discusses the psychological residuals of slavery and how that impacts us to this day, right? So when you think about this violent connection between all the stuff that the slaves had to endure, in addition to being in Africa, then coming here, and then how there's a lot of violent connections between what's happening now with the police brutality, witnessing and experiencing death over and over again, whether you're there, whether you're watching it on the news or on Facebook or Instagram, it's causing secondary trauma just in and of itself. Last summer, with Clark Atlanta University Psychology Department, we traveled to Ghana. Shout out to Dr. T, who was our mentor there that helped sponsor that, the Sankofa project. But we were able to experience or actually visit what they call slave castles, which actually are slave dungeons, right? Were the places where they kept these slaves. And just thinking about that in and of itself, the slave dungeons being dark, not having food, the women going through menstrual cycles, being beat, being raped, all of these things is happening. And to say that that's not traumatic, again, right? And then also, the things that happen so how can that not be traumatic? We have to understand and validate that for ourselves. Lastly, we also understand that these generational traumas, while also was very traumatic, we also have to think about the resiliency piece of it as well. That for us to go through all of that and we're still here, we're still resilient, we're still empowered, we're still keep the strength that we have, that's what's in us and how we thrive in the face of adversity. So while it's depressing and sad to think about all of the trauma that we've had to go through, our people, we can also reframe that in a way of strength and growth as well. So again, experiencing slavery creates trauma and it's real, and we have to validate that for ourselves, but we also can seek help and keep healing. I could go on and on, so.
Hey, look, I think we're going to have a part 3 because you just taught me something new about the slave castles in Ghana. I am a history buff, so I am definitely looking that up when we get off this webinar. Thanks. All right, and don't forget, Alumni Roar, to definitely drop your social handles in the chats and your practice if you are accepting new clients, because you never know who may be in the attendee section that may be looking for help.
Awesome.
So thank you. If you all have any questions for Alumni Roar, please type them into your Q&A box in your Zoom control panel now. We will be sure to get to them during our Q&A session. Thank you so much, Alumni Roar. We truly appreciate it. And someone talking about you were so awesome on their dissertation committee. I'm thinking, like, how is she able to be on someone's dissertation? She's like 20. Goodbye. Next. See, we are Black doesn't crack because we look great. So last but never least, introducing our final panelist for this afternoon is Alumna Adelia Johnson. Alumna Johnson is an Atlanta native. Whoop, whoop. She is a graduate of Clark Atlanta University, where she received her Bachelor of Arts in English and her Master's in Social Work from the Whitney M. Young School of Social Work. Alumna Johnson currently serves as a school social worker in the Atlanta metro area, where she provides support for families that may experience life barriers that impede on the student's education. Alumna Johnson is a published author of Black Man, I'm Listening, and Spiritual Insomnia. She is the owner and CEO of I Am My Morning Coffee Incorporated, that serves as a platform to provide mental health education and self-care topics. Alumna Johnson is a certified youth mental health first aid instructor that educates and certifies others as youth mental health first aiders to help young people experiencing a mental health emergency. You may join Alumna Johnson every Wednesday at 7:30 a.m. for her I Am My Morning Coffee broadcast on Facebook and on YouTube. You could also connect with her on social media at Inspire DAJ or I Am My Morning Coffee. And she will also drop those into our chat as well for you all to be sure to follow her and listen to her broadcast. So thank you so much for being a part of this panel and for always serving your alma mater, Alumna Johnson. How are you doing today?
I am doing absolutely wonderful. Honored to be here.
Yes.
It's a pleasure with some of my favorite people. Oh my gosh.
Well, we are honored to have you, and we are honored to hear what you have to say as well, ma'am. So we're going to jump into your first question. So, stress induces changes in multiple systems of the body and puts a person in and on alert state known as hyperarousal. That has been found to be a central driver of insomnia or to some type spiritual disturbance. So tell us a little bit more about your book, Spiritual Insomnia, and the perspectives you wrote from it.
All right, thank you so much for that question. Spiritual Insomnia was written from two perspectives. It was written from the spiritual perspective, and it was also written from a mental health perspective. I know we talked earlier about bridging mental health and spirituality, because yes, Jesus is the answer. Yes, I do believe that God is the answer. However, I also believe that your therapist can help as well, so that we can have a healthy frame of mind. So Spiritual Insomnia offers some suggestions, some practical ways on how to bridge your spirituality and how to not allow your situations or your trauma or your struggle to consume you. Because the truth of the matter is, and I use the insomnia as a metaphor, but because insomnia, it keeps you up at night, and that can be contributed by stress, that can be brought on by mental illness, that can be brought on by a host of life events. So it's kind of flipping it to not falling asleep on God and allowing God the opportunity to provide you the resources, to provide you the means, and to provide you somewhat of a way of escape in dealing with your issues, dealing with your mental issues, dealing with life, period. Because life can present a whole bunch of challenges. And the truth of the matter is that it's not necessarily what you go through, but how you go through it is what makes the difference. So Spiritual Insomnia just offers some insight as to how to walk that journey practically, because when we're in an emergency, it's kind of hard, to consider, all of the things you have in your toolbox. So.
True, very true. Now, this year alone, there have been over 6.8 million Black Americans who have had a diagnosable mental illness.
Yes.
If we are unable to remove the negative stigma surrounding mental health in the Black community, we are willingly allowing another generation to grow up without access to counseling and mental health improvement resources that can help them live a happy, viable life. So how can we accurately utilize our voice and platform to create a long-lasting change within our communities?
I think that's a wonderful question. And to echo what some of the amazing panelists have already alluded to, is to be honest and being real with yourself. And being honest with the people that you're around, the people that you love, the people that you care about, and being honest about what it is that we go through. I think sometimes what isolates us is us thinking that we don't share certain struggles. And when we're honest and we're open about not only our struggles or what it is that we may be dealing with, but also, okay, what kind of help are you receiving? One of the things that I've encouraged students and teachers even, and just my friends and my family, and I've done it as well, is to create a safe card. Because when you're in a mental health emergency or when you're stressed and you're having a meltdown, it's hard to clearly think through, okay, how do I get myself out of this situation or out of this slump? So the safe card kind of puts all of your coping mechanisms, the things that makes you better, the things that make you smile, the things that make you happy in one centralized location on a card. And you give that to your friends and your family. And you give that to them and you say, hey, listen, if I'm in a moment, if you catch me in a state of depression, if you see me slipping, I need you to refer to that card and I need you to help me get out of it. So I think part of it is us pulling together and being honest and saying, hey, look, let's hold each other accountable. Look out for me. I look out for you. And this is without judgment. This isn't, beating anybody down with spirituality or well, you need to just read the Bible. Well, you know what? I also have to take medication. And so it's being real about your Bible and it's being real about your meds. And so, so these are just some of the ways that I think that as a community, we can utilize our platforms by being honest, being vulnerable with one another, not being judgmental. I also think that we need to keep our pulse on our well-being. It's okay to take a step back and you don't have to feel like Superman or Superwoman or feel like you have to do everything. And you also don't have to feel as though that you have to, I want to say, live up to other people's expectations, because you know what your capacity level is. And so I think it's important to be honest about your capacity level. If it's something you cannot do or can't handle, say no. And don't apologize or feel bad or guilty for having to say no or having to step back and having to say, you know what, I got to take my hands off of that. So capacity level is important as well. And just one last piece that I would like to add to that is being aware when you're extending yourself to friends and family, being conscious of those people that have family members that have mental illness. Because even though you're not the one dealing with the mental illness, it's a lot on a family to deal with a family member that may be bipolar, that may be schizophrenic. They love that person. And so that can trigger some things in the person that may not even be dealing with mental illness or have a diagnosis, but have a family member that has a diagnosis. So, so these are, I think, just some things that we can do by having open and honest conversations and just being transparent with one another and holding each other accountable and wrapping our arms around each other as a community.
Alumna Johnson, please place your link in the chat box for people to purchase your book as well, because as we go, Alumna Phyllis Brown, we're all about lifting each other up and supporting each other. And also drop your handles in there too, because we want to follow you.
Thank you. I will.
So thank you so much, Alumna Johnson, for breaking it down and for bringing definitely these awarenesses in. I mean, I really appreciate each and every last one of you all for being so organic and fluid today, because this conversation is, something that's much needed, particularly in our community. And I'm happy to say that it's getting easier, but we still have a long way to go. So thank you. If you all have any questions for Alumna Johnson, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel now. We'll be sure to get to them during our Q&A session, which is now. So thank you again to our panelists for the insightful gems that have released today to go forth with you. We will go ahead and take some time for our questions now. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions into the question box in your control panel. Now is the time to definitely engage with your alumni and to definitely network. And I know you all heard, that some of our alums offer internships, they do dissertations, fellowships, they might do scholarships. I mean, all of it is a ship. So, let's just get on it and sail and, get to meet people and learn and lead and change. So I think that used to be his slogan or something. All right, so it looks like we have a few questions. Let's see. Okay, so this question is from Gwen Rohr. She said, Dr. Bass, you spoke on the past traumatic slave syndrome. Although we did not experience slave directly, do you think the mentalities of our ancestors have significantly affected us, which is why we do not have as many movers and shakers within the Black race today? Are we strong, yet way too passive?
Now you caught me right in the middle of this long reply that I was doing. So I'll start to read some of what I said to Ms. Rohr, not Dr. Rohr, but Ms. Rohr. And what I said was great question. Great question. Unfortunately, we live in a capitalistic society. We don't always have the access to climb up the ladder as quickly as others. Therefore, when it comes to being a mover and shaker, sometimes that moving and shaking is twisted in terms of trying to be seen, trying to be heard, trying to be felt. So now it's a need to validate myself versus getting out there and starting a business. So, I use as an example, so many of us who would rather spend all of our money on fashion and cars and things that depreciate versus, putting it in stocks and bonds and savings accounts. We need more financial literacy, and we need to get away from the capitalistic framework that this society is built on. I believe that everybody has in their mental capacity to be a mover and shaker, but it's just how they're moving, how they're shaking, and how they're supported as they move and shake. Are we strong yet way too passive? No, I think that we're very, very strong. I can't remember which one of my former students said it. I think it was Dr. Rohr. And let me say for the record, I'm so proud of y'all. I mean, I'm just beaming over here, Adelia, I'm ding, 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 ding. But anyway, I think that we all have the ability to do all great things, but until we start changing who we are and what we focus on and what our values are, we'll continue to show a weakness versus really the strength that we possess.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Bass. Thank you. The next one is from alumnus Paul Hobson, and this actually is for anyone on the panel that would like to answer it. He says, if anyone has watched the movie Moonlight, why is it that more white viewers watch it than Black viewers? This is a toss-up for anyone that would like to answer the question.
I love that movie. And the reason that I love that movie, I see you, Casey. I know you want to answer it, so I'm going to shut up since I answered the first one.
Go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Sure. Okay. Here's the thing. When it comes to that movie, she asked the question, why did more European Americans really gravitate towards it more than us? Well, in the movie, it depicted us, as really a different type of narrative of how we want the world to see us. It was a Black man in there who was gay, and I don't want to ruin the movie for those of you who haven't seen it, but there was a gay male character in there. We still have an issue when it comes to LGBTQ. We still, as a Black community, don't accept all of us. So there's still some issues with that. When it comes to showing us in the light of poverty, we typically don't agree and like to see that. It was created by European Americans and produced by African Americans. But again, when it comes to movies like Harriet, which we talked about, we don't support that. When it came to the Nat Turner movie, we didn't support that. So there's a lot of things that we don't support that we stay away from because it doesn't promote what society tells us we are, the pimps, the Denzel Washington character who was the rogue police officer. All of these negative stereotypes that exist that we buy into that really don't look like us too much. So that would be my long answer.
Well, my answer was that, but a little shorter maybe, is the same reason why I've been getting text messages all week because of the movie, of the TV show Lovecraft Country, right?
Yeah.
There's just recently there had been a scene that people lost their mind. People texting me, blowing me up. Same reason we see this in P Valley, right? So people sending me text messages today in one of the Facebook group for HBCUs about Andrew Gilliam, and how there's a lot of anger in the Black community when it comes to homosexuality. And so I feel it's going to be a lot harder to get that support when we as a community haven't had the discussion and the healing in regards to it. So
Lovecraft Country. I actually just saw that for the first time yesterday, and it is amazing. Oh my!
Catch on up, history major. It's all about history. They talk in the till in there, everything. It's wonderful.
I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop watching it. I was just like, wow. But I'm not gonna give it away. Sorry. Okay. Last but not least, this is the last toss-up question for anyone on the panel that would like to answer it. It says, what practical steps, I'm sorry, this is from Alumna Tatum Booth. She said, what practical steps does one take to begin the search for a therapist in their local area? Therapy is a personal life experience, and it can be hard selecting a therapist. So that is for anyone that would like to answer it.
I would just like to add just a very short answer, very short. I think it's important, and this is from experience. I think it's really important to know what it is that you're looking for in a therapist, because there are some things that could be a trigger for people. If you have trauma with men, then a male therapist may not be for you. If you have trauma with or have mommy issues or dad issues, you want to be mindful of those things and be mindful of your biases when you're looking for a therapist. I think that's really important. And it is important to find the right therapist. And I think that they put some amazing links in the comment box as well. But I definitely want to extend for them to offer more resources. But I just wanted to make sure that it's really important to know what it is that you're looking for and know what could trigger you.
Can I add one thing as well? Also, you can always ask the therapist to see if they do a free phone consultation. I know I offer that sometimes for clients as well. Just a free 15, 20 minutes to chat. I always say that I can be the best therapist in the world, but if there's not a good therapeutic relationship, it's not going to work. So taking advantage of that phone consultation can kind of help to see, am I vibing and is the energy right? Am I asking the right questions? Are they answering the questions? Are they answering the phone and returning my emails? All of those things matter. So take advantage of free phone consultation for those clinicians.
Okay. Alumna, Roy, you also had a question from, I saw it in here, from Alumna, from Danielle Bibb. She wanted to know if you could speak a little bit on the diplomat program.
Yes, so again, the lovely faculty in the psychology department, I feel so indebted to them. So really quickly, when I was in a psychology student, I was able to travel abroad to Turkey, and it was free, which was awesome. So one of my ways of giving back was to kind of pay it forward. So last summer we went to Ghana. Again, Dr. T created the Sankofa Project. We're allowing current students, psychology students, to pair up with an alum as a mentor. So we were able to go there, visit. There's also research that we actually was able to do, come back, publish it, present it. But they can reach out to me personally, and then I can get them hooked up with Dr. T and the psych majors or the psych professors if they're interested in that. But great way to give back.
Awesome.
Well,
Thank
let me add to that really quickly. Danielle Bibb was actually someone who was a diplomat. She's traveled the world.
Nice.
So she's an alum of this wonderful institution. So shout out to Danielle. I see you. Okay.
Egypt this summer, but you know, the COVID.
Yep, me too.
Ghana was on my list this year.
Ooh.
In due time.
Dr. Dunstan had a question. And he asked about spiritual insomnia.
Where did he put it at? Oh, spiritual. He wanted to know. Yes, this was to Hold on 1 second. This is to Alumna Johnson, actually. He wanted to know the title of your book and where can he get a copy of it at. So this is to Alumnus Dr. Donston.
Thank you so much for asking. The name of the book is called Spiritual Insomnia, and it is actually on Amazon. And I put the link in the comment box.
In the comment box, okay.
And actually, if you inbox me, I'll send it to you myself personally and write you a nice message.
And shout out to Philip Dunstan. That's actually Dr. Philip Dunstan. He's the chair of religion and philosophy. So here at the campus. So the great one himself. Shout out to Dr. Dunstan.
Well, if all hearts and minds are clear now before we get ready to close out, thank you all so much for the questions. Please stay in contact with our alumni and please look out for our upcoming webinars, which will take place every other Thursday, rotating from noon to 1 p.m. or from 6 to 7 p.m. Now for the next couple of weeks up, we're going to have the one that you'll see on October 18th. Yes, that is correct. There will be 2 on that day, and we definitely look forward to you all being present. We're going to have some pretty interesting people on there that are going to be giving some very helpful advice. So be sure to tune in from noon until 1 and from 6 to 7 p.m. So great. Thank you all so much. We appreciate you for being here this evening. A super special thank you to my colleagues, Senior Director of Alumni Relations, Ms. Galen E. Gatewood-Josho, and to Dr. Rhodes for their stellar service, and to our panelists for a remarkable job today. Thank you again to our awesome attendees for always coming out and for supporting us. We truly, truly appreciate you. We hope to see you on October 8th at noon and at 6. Look out for more information regarding our webinar and alumni news by following us on social media at CAU Office of Alumni Relations. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram, or on YouTube at CAU Office of Alumni Relations, or visit www.cau.edu and click on Alumni at the right-hand corner of the front page and check us out there. Thank you so much. Let us know what you think about our webinars coming up and present, and you will be receiving a link soon with the recording. So take care and have an awesome weekend. Thank you.